I was going to talk about George Washington a bit, and then I didn't because I thought it was too tenuously related. He's the father of our country, but he wasn't, I'm not going to talk about him fatherhood necessarily. But yeah, Eldritch fans super chat talking about like the No Kings and whatnot does tie in a little bit because today is the 250th anniversary of the American Army. And as I was saying, George Washington led what was technically the precursor to the American Army because the United States government didn't exist. We had the Continental Congress, and it was the first time, an army of the colonies, was standing up to Britain. And George Washington was such an amazing, really father figure for our country because he set, they're calling the protests today No Kings. And George Washington was a huge part of actually setting the precedent that we're a country without a king. Everyone across the world just assumed that George Washington would take power once, the Revolutionary War was fought and Britain stood down and whatnot. Everyone assumed that George Washington would take over and be what amounted to the King of America, whether they called it an emperor or whatever. Even when the Constitution was ratified and he became the first president, everyone just assumed like it was no problem at all because this was just what was done. Anytime there's a revolution, the head of that revolution becomes the next, whether it's dictator or whatever, just becomes the next head of the state, and that regime sticks there forever, until he dies or whatever. And George Washington was absolutely, truly revolutionary in resigning his commission after the war was done. Britain signed the Treaty of Paris. Everything was done. There was no more need for the Revolutionary War anymore, and Congress dissolved the Continental Army. George Washington resigned his commission. Everyone was shocked at that. Then, when he's overwhelmingly elected as our first president, everybody was shocked that he stepped down after 2 terms. I mean, you could not believe this, and he set this precedent that no, we don't have a king. This is not a monarchy. We're a democratic republic. We're a constitutional republic, democratic republic. And that's a legitimate gripe to have at any point in American history. You can go out and protest or talk about the executive branch, the presidential branch of government having too much power. That's a legitimate thing to talk about. It's a legitimate thing to protest if you want. There's always been that built-in tension in our history, in our Constitution itself. When the Constitution was being ratified, going from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution, there was a big tension. People didn't like that. It was the tension between states' rights and federal rights and our federal power and whatnot. So that's always been a thing. And that's why it pisses me off so much that the protests going on today are trying to label themselves as No King protests, because that's not what anybody's protesting today. It's a legitimate thing to protest. You can go protest, hey, that the executive branch is having too much power. Not a single person out there protesting today actually thinks that. They're mad that Donald Trump has too much power. They're not mad that the executive branch is doing or able to do too many things. They're mad at the things that President Donald Trump is doing. And if that wasn't the case, then where the hell were you during the 8+ years of straight glorified hero worship of Barack Obama? And they'll say, well, no, I was uncomfortable with that too. BS. I lived through that era too. I knew what a damn fool America made of itself. You're not going to tell me that you're just mad. You're mad that the executive branch has too much power in general. No. So it's very insulting, I think, to the legitimate discussion that can be had about the executive branch having too much power. It's just insulting to that, that people protesting Donald Trump, which is also a legitimate thing to protest if that's what you want to protest. We have rights to protest things we don't like. We have rights to protest administrations we don't like. Be honest about it. This whole No Kings garbage is marketing. It's not ground roots protest. It's marketing. It's the powers that be, the covert authority. It's people trying to pull the strings of the public like little puppets. And it annoys me. But anyway, so that's it. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But I wasn't going to mention that, but then your super chat made me link it to George Washington, the father of our country. So I did that.